almost looks like Star David, doesn't it? If you look at it really deeply, our grandchildren.
Yeah.
We're just looking around, trying to get in your way. Yes, I hope you don't mind it. We're just.
Hello?
Makes a noise.
It's not my greatest talent also. Got a little bit of sound out of it before we're done. Okay.
I just feel like we need to be closer. Valerie Pierce. Nice to meet you.
Well, welcome to Sacred Objects Across Religions, Connecting Through Symbols and Faith. My name is Mary Peterson, and I'm representing Interfaith Partnership of Greater St. Louis, who is sponsoring this event tonight. In a time marked by division, we courageously bring people of diverse faiths and backgrounds together through dialogue, education, service, and celebration. We're grateful so many of you have joined us tonight. We not only have an audience with us, but we have viewers joining us on live stream. We would like to thank Parkway United Church of Christ for having this capability for us, and to our sound and tech crew, Andy Lowenthal and Mike Rogers, for being behind the scenes tonight helping. A bit of housekeeping: the bathrooms are just through the foyer at the hall. Make a left, and they're just right there on the right-hand side. We'd like to thank our sponsors tonight. Our title sponsor, the Baha'is of Greater St. Louis. Our bridge builder sponsors, the St. Louis Archdiocese, Harvey and Leanne Schneider. And our unifier sponsors, Marvin Anderson, Julie and Lenny Frankel, Ladue Chapel Presbyterian Church, the Missouri Conference of the United Methodist Church, Dr. Humayun and Soraya Kadir, and the Turkish American Society of Missouri. Our generous sponsors and all other donors allow us to put on interfaith events such as this. We'd like to thank Reverend Kevin Cameron, our Vice Chair of our Cabinet, for allowing us to gather in this sacred space at Parkway United Church of Christ, and I've asked him to welcome us and offer a blessing.
Thank you, Mary. We're grateful that you are with us tonight, whether you're here in the sanctuary or with us virtually. We take our interfaith partnerships very seriously, and so we're delighted to be hosting tonight. Would you please pray with us? Holy One of many names, we recognize you in symbols and stories, in stirrings, and in society. And so help us to notice you, to celebrate you, to share you with others, so that they will be led to faith, led to community, led to compassion. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Cameron. Now let's get to our forum. We have 4 incredible speakers today who are going to address the subject of sacred objects and symbols and how they connect us to Adonai, God, Allah, and Brahman. As I was preparing for this event, I had the thought come to me: never assume what a sacred object means to people. Most humans, they can't see God, they maybe can't even hear him, and they definitely can't touch him. And so they will use an object to become closer to him. And we're going to learn tonight how earthly objects draw us nearer to the divine and able to have a relationship better with him. And we're going to dig deeply into this topic tonight. Our first speaker is Rabbi Yonason Goldson, representing Judaism. Rabbi Goldson applies ancient wisdom to the challenges of the modern world. He is a TEDx speaker, award-winning podcast host, and author of 7 books, including Dawn to Destiny, Exploring Jewish History and Its Hidden Wisdom. An executive trainer and coach for Vistage Worldwide Incorporated, Rabbi Goldson's insights on personal and professional ethics have been cited in Forbes, Newsweek, Business.com, and The Washington Post. He serves as Executive Vice President of the Coalition of Jewish Values for the Missouri chapter, and his weekly column, The Language of Ethics, is published weekly by Creators Syndicate. Rabbi Goldson, who also teaches at Esther Miller Bias Yokov Girls High School here in St. Louis. where he challenges his students with his Socratic method, unorthodox classroom style, and stories of his days hitchhiking across the United States. Please welcome Rabbi Goldson.
Okay, how's that? It's us against technology. This event reminds me of the story of the fellow who wandered into a different interfaith event. And as he was mingling around, and the priest came up to him and said, "My son, tonight you will walk on your own 2 feet." He said, "Well, thank you, Father, but I'm walking just fine." He mingled some more. He came to the rabbi. The rabbi said, "My friend, tonight you will walk on your own 2 feet." I appreciate that, but I'm perfectly healthy. The monk came up to him and said, my child, tonight you will walk on your own 2 feet. He rolled his eyes and said, thank you very much. When the event was over, he went out of the parking lot. He looked around, and that's when he realized someone had stolen his car. Life is full of challenges, and challenges are part of the Jewish experience. We have a long history. In fact, some of the challenges we face have been commemorated on the stage and in film. Please raise your hand if you've seen Fiddler on the Roof. So, do you remember the name of the opening song? Tradition. Tradition. Now, if you remember, as Tevye is introducing the theme of the movie, of the show, he stops. He looks into the camera. He looks at the audience. He says, "We wear fringes on our garments. Why? I'll tell you. I don't know. But it's a tradition." Well, tonight I'm going to tell you why. First thing in the morning, in the European communities, married men wear what's called a talis. In some of the other communities, it starts with young men at bar mitzvah at the age of 13. And we take this prayer shawl, we open up, and we say a blessing, which I'll translate for you into English. Blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to enwrap ourselves in tzitzis, in fringes. Hold over our head. And then we wear it for the duration of the morning prayer. Now, once upon a time, Jewish men would wear this all day long. The custom has changed over time. But, today, we have all sorts of styles that did not exist. This was an outer garment for most people in ancient times. Many people could not afford tailored garments, and that may not have been the case. So in the book of Numbers, towards the end of chapter 15, it says as follows: "Speak to the children of Israel and bid them that they make them throughout their generations fringes on the corners of their garments, each with a blue thread, that you may look upon them and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them." So the word tzitzis refers to these fringes. And the commandment applies specifically to four-cornered garments. Now, today, the styles are such that most of us don't wear four-cornered garments, and that's why I'm wearing a special undergarment, which has four corners, so that I can continue to observe this precept even in a time when the styles no longer are what they once were. But what exactly is the significance, what is the symbolism of this fringe? Well, I know this is a little different for young people today who seem to favor tattered clothes in many cases, but for those of us who maybe are a little more mature, you know that the inside of a garment, you don't expect to see fringe. You expect it to be folded under and sewn clean. That's the sign of a finished garment. So what is the symbolism of the fringe? It's that God created the world unfinished. He left it to us to be his partners in creation. In fact, one of our greatest sages, Rabbi Akiva, lived about 2,000 years ago. He was once confronted by a Roman governor who said to him, "What is greater, the acts of man or the acts of God?" What answer do you think he expected? He expected him to say the acts of God. We'll actually come back to that in a little bit. So Rabbi Akiva said, "Wait here." He went out, he came back with a beautiful baked loaf of bread and a handful of raw wheat. He said, "Which would you rather have?" "The bread." He said, "Wait one more moment." He went out, he came back, he had a bottle of fine wine in one hand and a bunch of grapes in the other. "Which would you rather have?" "The wine." He says, "You've answered your own question." And the governor got confused and walked away. Because it's a somewhat sophisticated idea that God wants us to be his partners. That's what we're here to do. We are here to complete the world that he created for us, to use the raw materials, the resources that he put within our grasp, and bring them to a state of completion. And really what that symbolizes is the work that we do on ourselves. It's fine to save the whales and save the snails and save the trees and save the bees. It's all good. But ultimately, what do we have control over? Ourselves. It's the work we do completing ourselves that brings completion to the world that we live in. And that's the symbolism of the fringe. Now, what about the blue thread? You all see the blue thread? No? It's not there. See, the blue thread was made with a dye that came from a sea creature. And over the years, it was forgotten what animal it is. And this is part of our oral tradition that was handed down to Moses at Sinai. And so what we have done is we have opted to forego that blue thread because we would rather omit part of the commandment than risk doing it incorrectly. Today you will see some Jews who wear tzitzis do have the blue thread. We think we've rediscovered it. And so there are some parts of the community, they say, well, there's enough evidence this is the right thing to do that we're going to do it. And there are others who say, no, we'll wait. We'll wait for Messianic times when God can tell us how we're supposed to do it because we don't want to risk getting it wrong. But what is the significance of this blue thread? So the sages teach a very interesting way of looking at it. They say when you look at the blue thread, now we have to use our imagination, you visualize the blue thread. The blue reminds you of the sea reminds you of the sky, and the sky reminds you of the throne of heaven. It's a lovely image, isn't it? But if you think about it for a moment, it seems that there's an unnecessary step in there. Why do I need to remember the sea in order to remember the sky? Why can't I just go straight to the sky? I know the sky's blue. So let me ask you, is water actually blue? Water's clear. Why does water look blue? Because it reflects the sky. Everything in our physical world is a reflection of some spiritual reality that is transcendent, that we aspire to bring down and integrate into our lives so that we can live spiritual lives in this world. And the way we do that is through the commandments. Every commandment, what was the blessing I said? Blessed are you. Lord our God, King of the universe, one who sits on the throne, who sanctifies us with his commandments. By keeping the commandments of God, that is how we achieve sanctity. And every particular act connects us with that higher spiritual reality and brings spirituality down into our lives so that we can be more successful in perfecting the world that we live in by working on perfecting ourselves. Now, you feel around this time of year, you start to wonder, where did the year go? We're already 2/3 of the way through. We're not sure what we did with the first 2/3. Well, if you're Jewish, it's even worse. Because our New Year's comes in about 6 weeks. Right? The Jewish New Year, which is called Rosh Hashanah, this year it comes in September. Now, let me read to you one of the most well-known commandments of Rosh Hashanah. And in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a holy convocation. This is a day of sounding for you. You might be wondering if it's the beginning of the calendar, why is it the 7th month? Good question. We'll talk about that another time. What is this day of sounding? And what is the significance of this date? Well, according to our tradition, God created the world Rosh Hashanah time. In fact, he created it 5 days before Rosh Hashanah. So what is Rosh Hashanah? What was created on Rosh Hashanah, the 6th day of creation? Human beings. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the creation of mankind. The first man, Adam, the first woman, Eve, they were created on Rosh Hashanah. And they were given a sacred trust. Unfortunately, things didn't work out according to Plan A. And so we had to go to Plan B. Of course, God knew this would happen. And there's a very profound reason. It actually relates to what we just said. Because rather than receiving something we hadn't worked for, we now have the opportunity to work for the perfected world that we hope to eventually achieve. But the day of sounding, let's explore that. This is a shofar. We blow it on Rosh Hashanah. I am not a talented shofar blower. I will see with a little divine assistance I can get a sound out of it for you. Maybe a better sound than that. Sorry, best I can do. Come to our synagogue, you'll hear something much more impressive than that. But what's the idea behind this? The fascinating teaching by the sages, they say that when we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, it confuses Satan. What does that mean? Well, first of all, the term Satan, in Hebrew it's Satan, and it means adversary. And the Satan is not a guy in a red suit with a pitchfork in our tradition. Satan is he's a divine emissary. He's an angel. He's an agent of God. And his job is to challenge us, to create situations where we have to push ourselves to do the right thing, to resist the wrong thing, to grow, to improve, to be virtuous, to be devout. If there would be no opposition, if there'd be no adversary, then there wouldn't be much accomplishment. You ever see those, the obstacle courses run by the Navy SEALs? Why don't they remove all the obstacles? And then they can run the course faster. Because the point is not to run the course fast. The point is to get over the obstacles, because that's how we get stronger. That's how we understand on our own 2 feet. That's how we become people of strength, inner strength, outer strength. And that's the job of the Satan, to oppose us so that he pushes us so that we have to push back and get stronger. And when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, and it's now time for an accounting, because that's what an anniversary is. It's a time when you reflect on the last year and the growth and the challenges and the accomplishments and everything we've achieved and how we're going to take what we've done so far and go forward and improve. And he comes before the heavenly court and he accuses us. All our missteps, all our shortcomings, all our failures, all our lapses, he's ready to bring them all out before the heavenly tribunal. And we blow the shofar, and he gets confused. Okay, I can understand that happening once, maybe twice, maybe half a dozen times. I mean, the Sultan, he's a pretty clever guy. I mean, think of all the tactics he uses to get us to do what we don't want to do. We've been doing this for 3,300 years. You think he would have caught on by now. But here's the idea. When we blow the shofar, what we're doing is we're taking all of our aspirations, all of our hopes, all of our dreams, all of our wishes, all our desires to live up to God's expectations. And we realize we can't even articulate a fraction of what we want to. There's so much in our hearts that we want to say. And we know we're just going to stumble over our words. We know our words are going to be so inadequate, and so we put it all into an inchoate sound of yearning, of longing. And essentially what we're doing is we are summoning ourselves to court. We're saying, God, we want you to judge us. We want you to hold us accountable. We want to take responsibility for our shortcomings and misdeeds so that we can clear the slate and move forward. And that's what confuses the Sultan. What can he say at that point? He can't accuse us because we've already thrown ourselves on the mercy of the court and asked to be judged. We've taken the wind out of his sails. And this is the way we want to start the new year, by reflecting on the past so that we can move forward into the future. One more symbolism I'd like to share with you, and that is the bris of the covenant, which is the circumcision. There will be no visual aid with this one. But what exactly is the idea? It's interesting that according to biology, according to evolutionary science, we have developed over millions of years into a form where every element of our bodies and our minds have grown according to what is useful, what is beneficial, what is going to help us survive and succeed and prosper. You look at the complexity of the eye, that even with all of the modern technologies with camera lenses, can't even come close to what the human eye can do. The vocal cords, the sinews, my college roommate went off to medical school, and he wrote me that his medical school professors credited the Celestial Design Committee with the human body. We don't understand things a lot better now than we did back then. So how do you explain that there's a membrane on the human body that can be removed without impairing function at all? What's it doing there? It was placed there so that we can recognize that just because something exists doesn't mean it's good for us to have. The drive for human sexuality is the most powerful impulse in our biology. It can be incredibly creative. It can bring a husband and wife together in most profound intimacy. It can bring children into the world. And at the same time, It can be the most destructive force on the planet, tearing people apart, driving people into criminal behavior. And that's exactly the point. The sign of the bris tells us that we are in control of our impulses. Our impulses are not in control of us. If we harness them, if we channel them, if we direct them in a way that is beneficial and positive and godly, then we don't have to. That's what separates us from animals. Animals simply follow their nature. We have two natures. We have a spiritual nature and a physical nature. And they are embattled all the time. And the sign of the bris reminds me that no matter how strong, no matter how powerful the impulse may be, if it's not something that's going to bring us closer to God, bring us closer to our fellow men, our fellow human beings, then it's something that we want to rein in. When it's something that can be used beneficially, then we can apply it in a direction where it's going to bring beauty into the world. And that really brings us back to the first story that I told of Rabbi Akiva and the Roman governor. When he said, what's greater, the acts of God or the acts of man? He expected Rabbi Akiva to say the acts of God, at which point he was going to say, so why do you take a perfectly formed newborn baby boy and start cutting off pieces of his body? And when Rabbi Akiva answered him the way he did, the governor didn't. It was like answering. It was like confusing the Satan. He had nothing left to say, because that is the essence of what Judaism teaches: to take what we have, to seek to elevate it, to make that connection with the divine, and to have that guide us through the course of our life, so that we can bring the presence of God into the world for all our fellow human beings to recognize. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Wow, ultimately we're here to create ourselves and how everything reflects God. Thank you for giving us a window into eternity and also reminding us who we are and the purpose of life. Hold on. I won't be able to introduce Jack if I don't calm my voice down. Here to represent the Hindu community is Jack Sis. He's the founder and president, my goodness, of the Living Insight Center, a universal spiritual center that honors and believes of all individuals. Jack is a member of our cabinet and on our board of directors, and has served as one of our past presidents. He's been a Hindu for more than 60 years after having been raised a Presbyterian. And he's very active at the Hindu Temple of St. Louis. He frequently gives presentations, and he's been one of the temple's main tour guides for 17 years. Before devoting himself to spiritual matters, he graduated from Yale University, was a member of the United States Senator Tom Eagleton's staff, and then was a corporate healthcare attorney for 23 years, including serving as the general counsel for Barnes Hospital and playing an instrumental role in the creation of BJC Healthcare. This fall, he will be honored at our annual dinner and celebration, receiving one of our Lifetime Achievement in Interfaith Relations awards. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Great. First, a little context. You don't hear much about our religion in this part of the world because there aren't that many people in this part of the world, but as you may know, it's the third largest religion in the world. It's exceeded only by Christianity and Islam, but there are more Hindus than there are Catholics and more than there are Protestants. So it's a very large religion, roughly 1.4 billion people, but all but about 30 million. Kevin, this is feedback. We good? All but about 30 million are in or around India. So we only have about 3 million in the United States and about 15,000 in St. Louis. It's about the same as the number of Mormons. So it's a small community. It's a pretty affluent community. When I became a Hindu at the age of 14, there was literally only one Indian family in St. Louis because there were immigration restrictions, and only 100 people from India were allowed to migrate to the United States per year from 1925 to 1965. So now we have about 15,000. It's a pretty vibrant community. Most people do not understand our religion, and it is reasonable that you wouldn't, because probably most of you, unless you've heard me talk or someone else of our faith talk, would think that when you look at this, it's a polytheistic religion. It is not. It's a monotheistic religion. Virtually all Hindus understand there's only one God. That God is infinite, incomprehensible, indescribable, formless, nameless as far as we know. We call it Brahman, so we have a name to refer to. But we also believe that God takes many forms. And so that's what these are. And this is called, for theologians, this is called panentheism. Brahman cannot be depicted, cannot be described fully, but Brahman's forms can, and people being as we are, visual and so forth, we find it easier to relate to God if we can connect to God through a form than trying to connect to God which is ineffable. So it's impossible to describe Brahman, but if you're going to try, I think the best we've been able to come up with is that Brahman is an ocean of consciousness continually creating vibrations within itself that take its own consciousness and molds that consciousness, part of it, into patterns, into forms, and that's the physical universe. And if you take this to heart, it changes everything about how you relate to God and the universe, because it means God isn't somewhere else creating and observing a universe separate from itself, but rather absolutely everything we experience is part of God. Should be recognized as such and should be treated as such. So when Hindus greet each other, you've probably heard us say namaste. That means the part of God embodied within this form, body, mind, soul, acknowledges the divinity within your form. And so this simple term, which sounds like a just very casual greeting, is actually extremely symbolic of our understanding of the nature of reality and the nature of each human being. And this is kind of like a fake it till you make it kind of thing. You know, at first, for years, this could just be a nice concept. It becomes, though, something which is an absolutely profound expression of your deepest nature, of oneness with everything and oneness with every other being, and recognize that they are just as divine as anything you encounter. So science and Hinduism both say that everything we experience is consciousness vibrating, although they do say it in somewhat different ways. And they also both say that every particle of what we experience as matter is disappearing in and out of form millions of times a second. So we think we're very solid, but every particle of us is disappearing in and out of form, or in and out of formlessness, one could say, millions of times a second. And Hindus believe that one of those forms of God, this one, is continually recreating the universe in every instant using a particular set of frequencies, for which we have the name Om. And Om, we believe our language, and also Hebrew, is a language where the words carry the energy of what they refer to. They're not just labels. So when I say Om, I'm not just saying the name of the frequencies, I'm actually expressing some of the frequencies. I became a Hindu because the first time I chanted Om at the age of 14, I had a really profound experience. So this is Om. It's a combination of 3 Sanskrit letters, and this is the universally used symbol for Hinduism. Whenever you see a chart that shows all of the religions in a symbolic form, it's always this. So this is very basic to our religion. Now, Hindus also believe that these Om frequencies radiate out through the universe through a particular grid, and this is the grid shown in a two-dimensional form. It's called the Sri Yantra. There's a dot in the center, and that symbolizes the point from which all creation arises, and it radiates out through this grid. And this is 5 downward-pointing female triangles, 4 upward-pointing male triangles. I'll come back to the importance of male and female in a bit. And this is constantly moving. Sometimes this is shown in 3-dimensional form in what looks like kind of like a wedding cake. But really, I think even that is not dynamic enough because this is continually changing in all dimensions, which explains why the universe is constantly changing and is not symmetrical. Now, Hinduism is, we say it's the world's oldest religions. And I always defer to Judaism as equally old, but our religion, as we practice it now, is in many ways the same as it's been for 3,500 years, but many scholars say it goes back 5,000 years, and this is your year 57 something, right? But some say also 8,000 years. So it's certainly one of the oldest traditions. And this goes back to times when there was very little literacy. And so how do you communicate information? How do you present it in a way that people will remember it? You turn it into stories. And those stories, we have many stories, and many of them are strange. But we have many stories, and some Hindus would say they are just myths. They are made up stories just to get a point across, to convey information. And there are other Hindus who would say, no, they are more than that. They're actually legends that are based in truth, that are based in fact. So much of what I'm going to tell you is based on, some Hindus would say myths, so it's symbolic, and some would say legends, so that the stories are about real beings that actually do exist. So let's talk about some of the deity forms, and speaking about them in general. Again, some Hindus believe that these deity forms exist. Some believe they are just symbolic of varying aspects of Brahman. What we seek in our pujas, which is our term for rituals, is an experience of God that we call darshan, which is literally seeing and being seen by God. And it is easier for humans, as I said earlier, to do that if you can visualize something along these lines. This is more personal. This is something you can communicate with, whereas Brahman, being everything, is pretty hard to communicate with or feel like you're actually being in a relationship with. So what we do in our pujas is typically we devote a lot of we focus our devotion on these deity forms, and in doing so, the intention is to invoke that deity form to become present in a very focused, conscious way in the icon, or also further within ourselves. So we are embodiments of these deity forms in a general sort of way. We are not worshiping idols. When you go to, let's say you go to a Catholic church and you pray to Mary or Saint Therese, nobody thinks that's the statue is that being. And nor do we think that these are either. But these are a way for us to connect our consciousness to those deity forms. Now, the consciousness aspect is, I'm not sure why it's considered this way, but consciousness, I keep forgetting you're over here. I'm sorry, I'm not ignoring you. The consciousness aspect is male. The energy aspect, the vibrational aspect, is female. Consequently, the male deity forms have, call them spouses, we call them consorts. And they represent their energy aspect to go with the consciousness aspect, and you only have the totality if you have both. So the major deity forms have couples, and they can be worshipped separately, or they can be worshipped in combination. There's one form which shows a male and a female form split down the middle. In this particular form, I'll come to it, this is really androgynous. It's beyond form, beyond gender. So the ultimate form of a deity form is considered both male and female. So let me talk about some of the examples here. This is Shiva Nataraj. This shows Shiva, the form of God, who is continually recreating the universe in every instant, doing exactly that. So he's doing a dance that is taking place within a circle that represents the universe. It's actually a sphere, but if they made a sphere, you wouldn't see him. So the sphere, as you can see, has flames. It's on fire. And that's because the flame from one of his hands is continually destroying it in every instant. But in another one of his hands over here, he has a drum. It's a shake drum, and that generates frequencies, the Om frequencies, which brings it back into reality in every instant. So this shows the continuing recreation of the universe in absolutely every instant by Shiva using these Om frequencies. And this looks static, but he's moving in all directions. There's actually 108 different forms of the dance that he's doing here. There's 108 different kinds of statues that represent this, but this is the most common one. In Cern, Switzerland, there is the Large Hadron, I think is the way you pronounce it, collider, where they smash atoms to try to find the ultimate nature, what's within atoms. And outside of that is one of these, statue that was donated to them by the Indian government, actually. So when people see these, it's kind of hard to see in this size, but I have one at my center, which is, well, this big. And most people think it's a woman dancing. And it's Shiva dancing, but it's Shiva able to dance only because he has the female energy within him. So he's both male and female, or you could say he's beyond gender. So of all the major religions, this is the only one where it's totally normal, totally fine to worship God as male or female, or half male, half female, or both genders, or no gender at all, or not even any form at all. Now, Shiva is not typically worshipped in this form, and this gets more esoteric and symbolic, but Shiva is worshipped in, get this out, in this form. This is called the Shiva Lingam, this is called the Yoni. In Hindu temples like ours here, I represent the Hindu temple of St. Louis on Weidman Road, but there's about 5 or 10 other temples that either exist or in the planning stages. Anyway, they're carved of black granite there, and they're, well, half the size of this table or a little and taller. But in this form, and there are many temples that have them in this form as well, these stones here, the male represents the consciousness aspect, and these stones are found in a river in India just like this. We're going to be installing at my center or maybe at another temple one of these that's as big as I am, and it weighs 1,000 pounds. And the base is carved to resemble female anatomy. So you have, it's like a yin-yang symbol. It's male penetrating the female, two becoming one, male being birthed by the female, one becoming two. And in temple pujas, they're bathed and then they're decorated, and we chant and we lavish our devotion upon this in order to represent the union of consciousness and energy. It's not a sexual image. Hindus take great offense when people think that it is, although it may have started from some kind of a fertility religion 8,000 years ago, I don't know. But what we again hope to do is invoke Shiva in both conscious and energy forms to become present in the lingam and in the yoni. Now, another one of the primary deity forms is Vishnu. Shiva is generally described as the form of God who continually changes the universe in every instant, although devotees of Shiva like me view him as including all the aspects of Brahman, with the thinnest veneer of a personality. But Vishnu, so about 40% of Hindus worship God through Shiva, about 40% worship God through Vishnu. And so this is Vishnu who sustains the universe and also from time to time comes down onto the planet in what either is or appears to be human form, and those are called avatars. And one of the most, well, first of all, his female counterpart is Lakshmi, who provides all the abundance in the universe. He sustains the universe, she provides the abundance in the universe. And again, he from time to time comes down onto the planet in what is known as an avatar form to help people. And among the most famous of those is Krishna, and that's who this is here. He is believed to have actually lived about 5,000 years ago. Our most accessible scripture is the Bhagavad Gita, and in that he talks about all the different ways of connecting to God, and there are many, and some of the other fundamental concepts. So there's many people, maybe you've heard of the Krishna consciousness people, the people who used to proselytize in the airport. They're different from all the other Hindus. They believe that he's the ultimate God, not Brahman. And it's a whole other story, but if you meet somebody from the Krishna consciousness people, you get a whole different version of reality from what I'm telling you. Anyway, so Krishna, though, is important, and Rama was another one. Hindus believe that the Buddha was one of the avatars of Vishnu. The religion 3,500 years ago was polytheistic, it was pagan, and the priests were selling indulgences, basically. And so a reform era happened that was about 800 years long, and the religion came out monotheistic or panentheistic, and the priests are not the ultimate powers. Everybody can connect to God directly. And Hindus believe that Vishnu came down onto the planet as the Buddha, who was one of the leaders of the reform era, to fix the religion. It just happened that some of his followers decided to create a separate religion, just as Jesus was a Jew and some of his followers decided to create a separate religion. So another of the primary deity forms is Ganesha. This is Ganesha, or Ganesh, it's easier to say. And he is the form of God who runs the entire physical universe. He runs the entire system of karma, where you reap what you sow, and the reincarnation system is based on that. Our goal in life, Hindus don't believe our goal in life is to get to heaven or stay out of hell, although we believe in both. But it's to advance our individual consciousness so it becomes so like God's ultimate consciousness that we dissolve into it for all eternity. And Ganesh manages that by, first of all, putting obstacles in our way, but also then he has, as a matter of divine grace, the power to remove obstacles. Consequently, Hindus begin every puja, every visit to the temple, every major act in their life, every beginning of every day with prayers to Ganesh, asking that obstacles be removed. Hold on. There we go. So, an interesting story, this is kind of a long story, but there's a punchline to it that I think is worth waiting for. Ganesh was created by one of the consort forms of Shiva. Shiva was away in meditation for what would have been, in our terms, eons, and Parvati, his consort, was lonely, so she decided to create a son for herself, by herself. Shiva was away. And Ganesh had a human-looking head. And by the time Shiva came home, Ganesh was old enough to protect his mother, protect the home. Shiva wants into the home. Ganesh won't let him in. Shiva doesn't even know who this kid is who won't let him into his own home. They get into a fight, and Shiva decapitates him. Like I said, some of the stories are weird. And Ganesh's head disappears. Well, Parvati, being the energy of the universe, loses it, and the universe starts getting destroyed, and all the other deity forms come to them and say, calm down, destroying the universe isn't a good idea for anybody, and figure something out. So they do. And Shiva decides to bring Ganesh back to life by putting on his body the first head of a living being he could find, which was an elephant. So that's how this deity form came to have an elephant's head, and that's how this deity form, born, if you will, of an immaculate conception, was resurrected by his father. And we didn't get it from Christianity, and you didn't get it from us if you're Christian. And the Egyptians had kind of a similar story about Osiris. So maybe God shows up in kind of similar ways in different places. Now, places. Sacred places can be very sacred. And I want to mention just a few of those. The Ganges River in northern India is ancient, and it's believed to be a deity form. And it's believed that if you bathe in the Ganges, it will purify all of your karma. And in particular, there's a city there called Varanasi, which is believed to be Shiva's city. And it's believed that if you die there, Shiva will greet you and release you from reincarnation. So many Hindus aspire to die in Varanasi. Many Hindus aspire to bathe in the Ganges. And I've been to India twice. I was there earlier this year, and I bathed in the Ganges, and I went to Varanasi, and it's a pretty amazing place. Now, just upriver was another one of the most sacred places. It was the location of the Mahakumbha Mela. You may have heard about this because it's the largest gathering of humanity, and there was a stampede that 30 people died in. According to the myth/legend, 4 drops of the nectar of immortality fell in different places on the planet. And this energy that the nectar has can be activated by planetary alignments. And so every 3 years in one of these 4 places, there's a Kumbh Mela, but the most powerful of them, it happens every 144 years in a city called Prayagraj, which is also known as Allahabad. It's up kind of near Nepal. It's pretty close to Varanasi. So I went to the Mahakumbha Mela in January. The day I was there, the Indian government said there were 70 million people, all trying to bathe in the Ganges at the same time. The next day was the peak day. There were 100 million people. They said there were 660 million people total over the 42 days. There was a 186-mile traffic jam. 8 hours after I left the central area, 30 people died in a stampede. I was in 3 stampedes, and there was one for sure I wasn't for sure I was going to be coming out of it. But it was a really powerful experience, and I found I was very comfortable with my mortality. So it was a good experience, but it certainly was intense, and I'm not going to the next one in 144 years, that's for sure. Mountains are very powerful, in particular too. All Hindus and all Tibetans of any religion believe the most powerful, most important mountain in the world is Mount Kailash in western Tibet. Hindus believe that Shiva and Parvati live on top of it. No human has ever climbed it as far as is known. Tibetans, especially Buddhists, but there's also the Bun religion, which is very small, believe it's the center of the universe. The other mountain is Arunachala. It's in southern India. And there's a long story, but I'll give you just the brief version. Shiva, at the end of this story, embodies as a mountain of fire. And this was during the eon, we call them yuga, that was the most high frequency of all the yugas, as the planetary system goes around the galaxy. And so it became a mountain of fire, but now we're in the lowest frequency yuga, and that mountain of fire is now a mountain of stone, and it's in southern India. And I hiked and meditated in 2 caves on that mountain, and it's a pretty significant place. A couple of small things. We do mantras, we do prayers, we keep count with a mala. It's 108 beads with an extra one. It's called the Guru bead. You get to the end and you turn around and go the other way. And this particular kind of mala is one that a Shiva devotee would use. It's a particular kind of bead, or Rudraksha bead. I wear one all the time. People often ask, what are the stripes on the priest's foreheads, or what's the dot on the woman's forehead? These stripes are called tilaks. The priests wear them. If you see a priest and they have tilaks, it'll either be a V or a U with a line down the middle or a dot, or it'll be 3 lines across with a line down the middle or a dot and a dot. The V, those are Vishnu priests, and the 2 sides represent Vishnu's feet, so it sort of symbolizes your being at the feet of God. And the center part is Lakshmi. The Shiva devotees have 3 lines which represent 3 different things about Shiva, and the dot in the middle represents that Bindu, the center point here. It's the symbol of the creation point in the universe. It also represents the 3rd eye, which is the part of your being that enables you to have visions and have darshan. Some women will just put their Bindu is male, Bindi is female. They'll just put a Bindi in. It's a beauty mark these days for some. Last thing I'll mention, you will see Shiva devotees carrying around a trident. We call it a trishul. Shiva carries one. It's another of the primary symbols for Hinduism, especially for Shiva devotees. So Shiva carries it very often, and the 3 prongs represent different things like creation, preservation, and destruction, past, present, and future. Some of the deity forms will carry these as well. But also Shiva devotees, some of the ascetics, will carry these around, and it's like a portable altar. So at the end of the day, they may have given up everything: money, clothing, maybe, family, name, jobs, and they may carry this around, and at the end of the day, they'll plant it in the earth, and that's their altar. So unlike some of the religions, all of which we revere, we have an awful lot of iconography, a lot of imagery, sacred objects, and it's part and parcel of our belief that ultimately, while we're to transcend this physical universe, this universe is in its entirety very sacred and should be appreciated and enjoyed as such. So our rich imagery helps us remain focused upon the sacredness of everything. So thank you for listening.
It is wonderful to hear how not just the objects were sacred, but also many of God's creations were sacred. And every time I go to the Hindu temple, I always have the thought, is the object that houses the spiritual power, or is it God that can be manifest through that sacred object? And you did an excellent job of explaining that very thing. Thank you. And being an example of someone who uses that as to a better relationship and communion with God. Our next speaker is Dr. Valerie Karas, representing the Greek Orthodox Church. Dr. Karas has earned doctorates in pastric theology from the Aristotelian University of Thessaloniki and in church history from the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., and a Master's of Theological Studies degree from Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. Dr. Karas's main areas of research interest are women in early and Byzantine Christianity and sex, gender in early church theology, with additional interest in the area of Orthodox Christianity in ecumenical, interreligious, and feminist conversation. As a professor and theologian, she is sought after to teach and lecture locally, nationally, and abroad. She has published articles, translations, book reviews in scholarly journals, and books. The list of them is daunting and impressive. She has served on numerous ecumenical boards, such as the North American Academy of Ecumenists, the Society for Buddhist Christian Studies, and is currently our board president for Interfaith Partnership. Dr. Karas.
Is this? Yeah, okay. I'm going to see if I can see well enough to my PowerPoint presentation so that I don't need to open my Can you put the PowerPoint up now? Okay. So, yeah, there we go. Okay. So, and then you can go ahead and move to the next slide. That was just my cover slide. Can you move to the next slide? There we go. Okay, now I'm going to have trouble reading this. So I just wanted to give as a little intro because for us, symbolism is very closely tied up with worship. It's not only tied up with worship, but that's a big part of it. This quote from the Russian Primary Chronicle, in the late 10th century, the prince, the leader of the Rus, the people who we know today as Russians, Ukrainians, Belarus, etc., he decided that he wanted his people, him and his people, to become part of one of the great world religions. His grandmother, Olga, had become Christian, but his father had continued to worship the traditional pagan religion. And so he sent out emissaries to look at the various world religions. He looked at Islam, he looked at Judaism in the Khazar region, what's today Crimea, and he had them go to both Western and Eastern Christianity. And the representatives that went to Eastern Christianity went to Constantinople, to the great city, and attended the Divine Liturgy in the great church of Hagia Sophia, the Church of the Holy Wisdom. And this is what they wrote. "We knew not whether we were in heaven or on earth, for surely there is no such splendor or beauty anywhere upon earth. We cannot describe it to you. Only this we know, that God dwells there among humans, and that their service surpasses the worship of all other places, for we cannot forget that beauty." And this really, I think, describes the Eastern Christian approach to worship and the importance of liturgical and other forms of symbolism. Can we have the next slide? So, boy, I really am going to have to, I'm sorry, you guys. I don't mean to be ignoring you over on that side, but my vision is not good enough to be able to see the screen from there. So our approach to worship is indeed that idea of heaven on earth, that it transcends the everyday world. It's not supposed to be like everything around us. And it reflects the heavenly liturgy, and we'll see that even with respect to the church decoration plan. We also have this notion that the human person is a psychosomatic unity. We are meant to be both body and spirit. And therefore, our worship, our liturgy, involves the entire body and is a feast for the senses. So we appeal to all five senses in our worship. The other important aspect about Orthodox worship and our use of symbolism is that our theology regarding worship reflects our notion of the interrelationships that exist between or among the created world, humanity, and God. So we have a notion that is not either or, but is both and. God is both transcendent and immanent. God is not simply other and removed from us, nor do we understand God to be simply among us. But our notion is that, as Jack had mentioned earlier, panentheistic, that God exists in and through all of creation. We also have this understanding that humanity was created by God as a microcosm of all of creation. So we are physical, and we are psychic, and we are spiritual, and that all of that is because God has a vocation for human beings, which is to serve as mediators between the created world and God. And then for us as Christians, we understand the person of Jesus Christ, the one who is both God and human, as the ultimate mediator. Next slide. So this idea of creating heaven on earth we do through our architecture, our iconography, and all the other elements of our worship. So here's a classical design of what's called the cross and dome style. The earliest Christian churches were basilica, because that was simply that was a municipal building in the Roman Empire, the long hall, with the barrel vault. But what was developed was this idea of the shape of the cross having the transepts with a dome topping it, and the dome in particular representing heaven and God. And you can see, obviously, too, that idea of the dome then influenced traditional Islamic architecture as well. Next. So here's an example of a cross and dome, and you see in the front end on the right side the apse. So Orthodox churches traditionally are oriented to the east, so that you worship towards the rising sun. Next one. Yes, and then I just have a series of pictures so you can see different types of domes. Here's one that's sort of a semi-stovepipe style. Next one. Armenians tend to have a hexagonal dome. The onion domes, of course, are very traditional among the Slavic peoples. There you can see both St. Basil's in Red Square in the front, and in the background you can see the Church of Christ the Savior in Moscow. And here's one of the Coptic churches in Egypt. So both Eastern Orthodox and what we call Oriental Orthodox or non-Chalcedonian have very similar architectural styles. And all of these domes are really reflections of the dome of the great church of Hagia Sophia, the Church of the Holy Wisdom in Constantinople, modern day now Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey, which was built in the middle of the 6th century, and for a full millennium was the largest church and I think the largest religious building in the world until the construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And that's a picture of the interior. So you can see the amount of light. And again, that's a really important element, the symbolism of light. And light as radiance, light as warmth, light as illumination, not only physically, but also spiritually. So now the interior of Orthodox churches. Typically, they are filled with iconography. It might be mosaic, it might be fresco, might be just standalone icons. There is a style and a plan that developed over time with the interior. All of it with this idea, again, of transcending ourselves and also recognizing that we're part of a greater whole in worship of God. So the dome, as I mentioned before, represents heaven, infinity, God. The apse, that niche at the eastern end of the church, is where the altar is. So we'll see the iconography there tends to be liturgical in nature. The icon screen in front of the altar area has some of the most important saints in the life of the church. And then along the aisles on the right and left sides, which are the north and south sides, I should say south and north sides, of the church, And those aisles tend to have representations of male and female saints. And most of us aren't familiar with this anymore because we live in a 21st century Western environment. But for most of church history, not only in the East but in the West, and Judaism similarly, Islam similarly, men and women were separated in the church space. And so in most Christian churches, men were on the south side, women on the north side. And so the iconography reflects that. And then I'm not going to go into much, but the west wall of the church usually has an image of the Dormition of the Virgin Mary, and the narthex, which is the sort of introductory area of the church before you get into the main part of the church, would have images of various saints, maybe the life of the Virgin Mary, and in monasteries it was often very common for them to have images of martyrdoms, because monasticism was seen as a kind of small martyrdom. So here's looking straight up into the dome of a church, one of my favorites at St. Barbara's in Santa Barbara, California. And you see the middle is an image of Jesus Christ, which is called the Pantocrator, the Almighty. And the reason for that is because we cannot depict God. God is without form, God is spirit, God is beyond substance, right? But in the epistle to the Colossians, the Apostle Paul refers to Jesus as the image, or the Son of God, as the image of the invisible God. So the idea is that by depicting Christ as the Almighty, it is a way of referring to God the Father by analogy. And surrounding him are Hebrew prophets, because there's a whole notion of how revelation unfolds. Because remember that Christians understand, and especially those earliest Christians who were Jews, were Messianic Jews. They understood Jesus to be the Messiah. So that if you go to the next slide, you'll see that area there called the pendentives, which are right below the dome and support the dome. I don't understand all of it, but it's, it's that sort of architectural notion of how arches distribute the weight, right? If you go to the next slide, then you'll see that in those arches, in those pendentives, the traditional decoration plan is to show the four evangelists. So you've moved from God being represented in the person of Jesus Christ to the Hebrew prophets to the evangelists, and then you move down into the apse. And this is an apse from a church in Oakwood. It's a little bit hard to see, but at the highest level of the apse, now the highest part of what you're seeing is actually part of the domed ceiling. Not domed exactly, it's a kind of an unusual design. But right below that, I don't know what you call that beam, you can see the Virgin Mary with her arms outstretched. It's actually very unusual that she's not shown with the Christ child, but she is in a praying position at that uppermost level. And then directly below her is an image of the communion of the apostles. Now, this is not the Last Supper. This is instead a symbolic representation of Christ distributing the Eucharist to them. So they're actually, it's hard to see, but I'm going to have I'll have my laptop open later, so if anybody wants to, they can see any slide they want to later. There are two images of Christ at the altar in the middle there. So one is distributing the wine from the chalice, the other is distributing the bread from the Eucharist. And below that, directly below that, you see the upper part of images of saints who are liturgical saints. In other words, they have written liturgical texts that we do. Okay, the next one. So then you have, in front of the apse, you have the icon screen, the iconostation, iconostasis. And there's a traditional plan of that as well. So you have Christ to the right, the Virgin Mary, again with the Christ child, to the left, John the Baptist to the right, normally pointing towards Christ, because in the Orthodox Church, he's not called the Baptist, he's called the forerunner. And he's seen as the last of the Hebrew prophets, and he's pointing the way to Christ. And then to the left of the Virgin Mary and Christ child is the saint or the feast after whom a particular parish is named. And then there can be other saints or angels. Actually, usually you have side doors that lead back into the vestry and the table of preparation. And those are usually the depictions of the archangels Michael and Gabriel. So you can see that very plan, in fact, on this church here. Christ to the right, John the Baptist to the right of him, the archangel Gabriel to the right of the Baptist. On the left side, you've got the Virgin Mary. The saint of the church, in this case, it's actually a feast, the Feast of the Annunciation. It's a little hard to tell from here, but the archangel Gabriel's on the left and spreading the word to Mary on the right. And then to the left of that feast icon is the archangel Michael. And then here is what I had mentioned earlier about with the aisles, along the aisles, how you've got that distinction of men and women being on opposite sides of the church. So this is a church from Ravenna in northern Italy, which had some amazing mosaics. There are a number of churches. If you ever get a chance to go there, it's not far from Venice. This is Santa Apollinare Nuovo, and the north wall shows female martyrs. They're holding their laurel wreaths of martyrdom in their hands. And then the next image shows the south wall with images of male martyrs holding their images, so that you get the notion, which is very deliberate, that we don't just worship here, but our worship on the earthly level is reflecting the divine worship. So the angels and the saints, those who have gone before, everybody is worshiping together. Now, there are elements to the traditional Byzantine style of iconography that have symbolic value. If you've seen any Byzantine iconography, you know, for instance, that it's not real naturalistic looking. There is a period of a few hundred years where that Italian naturalistic Renaissance style became popular, but that was never traditional in the East, and we got finally a sort of a renaissance of the more traditional Byzantine style around the 1950s. And so sometimes you'll see, as in my own parish of St. Nicholas, the newer iconography is more traditional than the older iconography, which is that naturalistic Italian style. Although it is not naturalistic, it is still representational, but it is also symbolic in different ways. And that symbolism usually has some sort of theological element to it. So the use of gold background for many of the icons, specifically standalone kind of images of a saint, it's meant to take it out of a specific setting and put it into that notion of heaven, of something beyond the ordinary. You also have elements that are from different time periods of an event or something that are nevertheless held together. And this is particularly important when you're looking at periods before people could read, before the masses could read. People often forget the idea of everybody just reading their own Bible That's a ridiculous notion for most of human history. Until you had the printing press and paper widespread, this was impossible. Only the very wealthy had the opportunity to learn to read. So, for instance, many images of John the Baptist, and we'll see one, show him holding his own head. Okay? Seems odd, but it's helping you to see who is that that's being shown. On top of that, there are many symbols in Byzantine iconography that connect Christian content with Hebrew tradition and parts of the Hebrew Bible. Because remember, for us, Christ is the Messiah. He is the fulfillment of the prophets and the law. So for instance, and you'll see each of these elements, the Virgin Mary shown in the burning bush, and I'll explain the specifics of that. Jacob's well in the shape of a cross as though it's a baptismal font. Or the words in the halo of Jesus Christ. So it is kind of hard to see. Yeah, you really can't see it at all. There are 3 Greek letters in the halo of Christ, and that's quite typical in Byzantine iconography. And those 3 letters are the verb on, which means the one who is. If you go back to Exodus 3, to Moses' encounter with God on Mount Sinai, his first encounter. Remember, Moses had been raised as a polytheist, and he basically asked God what his name was. And God doesn't give him a normal name, right? He says Yahweh. He says, I am who I am. The ancient Greek translation, which the Hellenistic Jews in Alexandria did of the Pentateuch, translated that Hebrew into the Greek on. So what every icon of Christ is showing in the Orthodox tradition is that we identify that theophany of God, that appearance of God in interaction with humans, with specifically the person of Moses in the Old Testament, with the person who becomes incarnate, Jesus Christ. Next one. And this is an icon of the Virgin Mary. Now, this is one from an icon screen. It is the mirrored one sort of to the other one. This is from a monastery on Mount Athos. And this particular style is called the Odiatria, the one who is guiding. Odos means road, so to lead or to guide along the way. And if you look at Jesus, again, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but he doesn't look like a normal baby. He's kind of like a little man. He's even holding a scroll. But it's part of showing that he's not just a little baby. The next one. But other styles developed. I love this one. This style is called the glycophilusa, really the sweet kiss. And so he's squirming in her arms, and he's kind of embracing her and squirming at the same time. I just love that particular style. This is one of my favorites. This was by a Russian artist whose icons were so imbued with his spirituality that he was actually canonized as a saint, Andrei Rublev. And this is a very famous icon. He's basically taken it from the traditional icon of what's called the hospitality of Abraham, or of Abraham and Sarah, from the Oak of Mamre. It's from chapter 18 of Genesis. If any of you goes back and looks at that account, you will see that the visit of those 3 men, they're described in 3 different ways. So they're first called 3 men who come to visit, and, Abraham and Sarah offered them hospitality. But then later in the account, they're called angels. And then at the end, when one of them is speaking and prophesying, essentially, it says, God said. So what Rublioff did was said, we can't do an icon of the Trinity because only one part of the Trinity became incarnate and therefore has physical form. But we have this theophany, this manifestation of God to Abraham and Sarah in the form of these three men who visit them. So that icon becomes an icon of the Trinity. Okay. And here's what I mentioned before about the burning bush, again going back to Moses and Exodus. And the idea here is that just as the burning bush, which is yet another theophany of God, God is seen as being in some sense in this burning bush, which nevertheless is not consumed by God's presence. In the same way, the Virgin Mary is not consumed by holding within her womb the Son of God incarnate. And here's what I had mentioned before. You see an image of John the Forerunner, John the Baptist, holding his own head. You may also have noticed he's shown with wings. And the idea with that is because of the notion of him being a messenger. We have this word called angel in English, but it's just a transliteration of the Greek word angelos. And angelos simply means a messenger. It's somebody who transmits news. For instance, evangelism, evangelos, means good news. So it's not that we think that John was an angel in disguise or something, but that he is seen as being a messenger pointing to the Son of God incarnate. And here's an image of Jesus in conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well, Jacob's well. There's an Orthodox church over the well now. It's in near Nablus. It's in Nablus, basically. But you see it's in the shape of a cross. It actually looks like ancient Christian baptismal fonts. Obviously, it wouldn't have looked like that at the time that he had his conversation with her. But again, that's the theological content of comparing that with that water of baptism, because that's what their discussion was about, right? That he would give her water, she would never thirst again. So I wanted to just briefly mention the other senses that we also appeal to in various ways in our worship. The sense of hearing. So traditionally in Orthodox worship, everything is chanted or sung, a cappella. Now, here in the United States, a lot of our congregations initially bought churches that had belonged to other denominations. They had organs in them. And so we started using organs in some of these churches. But many of them are now returning to this idea of singing a cappella without any instrumental accompaniment. We also have bells, particularly in the Russian tradition. Those big church bells are very common, but within the church service, bells on the censers. In the Armenian tradition, they put bells on the liturgical fans, and then they've got these poles that the fans are on top of, and they twist those fans, and the bells just ring like crazy. We appeal to the sense of smell, incense, and really this is, these things are not peculiar to Orthodoxy. This is part of ancient worship. The use of incense goes across really almost every tradition. And there's practical reasons for it, of course. They didn't have deodorant in the ancient world. People didn't take baths very often, et cetera. But it also has, in the Psalms, in 140th, well, it's 140th in the Septuagint numbering, let my prayer rise as incense before you. That notion of our prayer rising up to God. Flowers. We have flowers for the adoration of the cross in the middle of Lent, the third Sunday of Lent. We decorate a thing we call the Kuvuklion. It represents the tomb of Christ. On Holy Friday, we have that decorated, covered in flowers, and those flowers are given out to everyone in the parish at the end of the service. Taste. We have liturgical foods. There is bread that is used, blessed at the end of the service and passed out, distributed among the congregation. It's called andidaron, which means literally instead of the gift, and it's taken from the loaf of bread that's actually used for the Eucharist itself. We have another kind of bread that's used for a short service that celebrates the breaking of the loaves, the multiplication of the loaves. It's called the autoklasia. We have for memorial services for the dead, a boiled wheat that's mixed with sugar and nuts and cinnamon and raisins and pomegranate seeds. And in fact, my sister just boiled the wheat today. We're going to assemble the koliva tomorrow for Sunday. We'll do a memorial service for my mother's 1 year and our sister's 10th year anniversary of their deaths. So we have these liturgical foods. I remember this Orthodox priest I knew, American Orthodox priest back when I was living in Greece. He had become Orthodox as a young adult in college age. And he said one of the things that intrigued him about Orthodoxy was that he'd never seen any other church where people came out of the church service stuffing their faces with food. You know, it wasn't like the meal afterwards in the hall. But it's part of that notion, as Rabbi had referred to earlier, that we take the elements of the world, of the created world, and we sacralize them. We make them for God. And the Eucharistic bread, of course, is the most important. And again, it's at both and. It's not a matter of it being just a representation or that somehow it replaces the bread and wine, but rather that it's both. It's transfigured. And finally, we have the sense of touch, that we use all of our body in worship, whether it's the sign of the cross or doing prostrations all the way down to the ground. And this is our last slide. I thought I'd give you just another example of the kind of symbolism that imbues all of our worship. So this is a paten, the liturgical bread. And there's a stamp that we put on it when we make it. I have to do that tonight. In the middle, it's got the Greek letters, the abbreviation for Jesus Christ, Jesus Christos. Below that, Nika is victorious. This is from the vision that the Emperor Constantine had. To the right side, you see these 9 triangles. They represent the saints. To the left, there's one large triangle representing the Virgin Mary. And then you have other things. In this case, they've simply duplicated the Jesus Christ victor at the top and bottom. But when the priest is preparing this, he's cutting these out of the loaf and saying prayers for these various persons. The middle in particular is going to go into the chalice. The ones at the top and the bottom, he's giving prayers, reading prayers on behalf of both the living and the dead. And so that just gives you a little bit of an idea of the kind of symbolism that imbues Orthodox worship and spirituality. Thank you.
Am I on? Okay, there we go. It was fascinating learning how we create heaven on earth through our architecture and how iconography can tell the stories from the scriptures. It was absolutely fascinating. So our last speaker is Dr. Ghazala Hyatt, representing Islam. Dr. Hyatt received her medical degree from King Edward Medical College in Pakistan. She completed her residency in neurology and a fellowship in neuromuscular disorders and EMG fellowship at Medical College of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia. Dr. Hyatt is a professor of neurology, director of neuromuscular and clinical neurophysiology services. Dr. Hyatt directs the multidisciplinary ALS clinic, so you don't want her to be your doctor. She is a director of continuous quality improvement for the School of Medicine at St. Louis University. She has been selected as Best Doctors in America from the years 2007 to 24, and I'm certain she'll probably be in 2025 as well. Dr. Hyatt is currently serving on our board of directors of Interfaith Partnership, and like Jack, is one of our past presidents. In fact, she was the first female president that we ever had. She is a board member of the YWCA and Pakistani American Association of Greater St. Louis, and is the chairperson of the Public Relations Committee of the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis. She has received numerous awards throughout the community, ranging from the Jewish Community Relations Council, and her latest being the Woman of Distinction from the Missouri Athletic Club, just to name a few. She's also written for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch Civil Religion blog. Ghazala.
Are you going to turn it on? It's on? Oh, okay, thank you. So, thank you so much. I know, thank you for your attention. Just briefly, in Islam, we do not have objects because it's against our faith to show God or prophets images. So you practically will never see that. That's what I say practically, because according to our faith, it's sacrilegious. So you would not see it, but some people have done it, and it's usually have created a lot of hard feeling. I will just go over briefly. I will just show you very briefly a few slides for the people who are just watching us, and then I'll show it to you exactly here. It says we don't have any objects, but we have some objects which have a lot of religious connotations. Next, please. So this is the word Allah that you will see practically any Muslim house you go or any place of worship. Allah is an Arabic word. It just simply means, if you convert it, it's the God. It's not something. So you might, if you visit Arab country, you will see non-Muslims also name being like Nasrullah. So it just simply means the God, which is a capital G. Next. So our sign is crescent for Islam, if you see it. So that kind of a symbolism which Mary was sending, try to find. Islam is crescent, and it is not started with Islam. It was for centuries before that. The reason for Muslims it is because we follow lunar month, that's why. And we do not adjust. So each year it will move by 11 days. So it's a little bit difficult. I know Jewish people follow the lunar month. There's some adjustment. We never adjust. It's just like when you sight the moon. Nowadays with science, we can calculate it. Some people still would prefer to sight. And the green color is just like, it's like the color from Prophet's time. It was sacred. So you will see a lot of time, a lot of Muslim countries' flags will have the crescent. And lots of mosques, which is a place where we worship, on the top of the minaret, you will see the crescent. Next. So this is one, is like our first is called Shahada. That simply means La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Most of the people see it on Saudi Arabia's flag, but this is, you will see it practically in every place. So while in the saving time, I'll just go over that. But at the end, maybe I'll show it for a couple of minutes, people who cannot see it. It just simply means there is no God with lowercase, but the God which I mentioned. Allah, the origin is El-Ilahi, if you remember in, even at we say the Jesus, it says the word Ilahi, like for millennium, that word has been using. So the Arabic word is Allah. And we believe Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. That's all it says. If you say that, and you have a couple of witnesses, that's what you, for us, it's your direct connection to God. Next. And so Quran is our religious book. It's that we believe in the other 3 scriptures too. We believe in Torah, we believe in Psalms, which, of David, and then Gospels, and then Quran. And we believe that Gabriel brought it to Prophet Muhammad. And he was not who could read or write, but we say there's a lot of that it was given to him. But people usually, when he would recite what came to him or was revealed, people would start writing, and that's how it was collected. It was collected after he passed away. Next. So you might see this prayer rugs. We call it janamaz, but simply prayer rug is fine. I have a couple of 2 or 3. And tasbih. I mean, the prayer, these one you will see everywhere. In practically every faith you will have. In Christianity and Yachurity, everybody, they use it. We have actually 99 beads. It's a different kind of, you could say, denomination. You could do it, but mathematically. And then we do, like you were talking about, we do 1 extra. So we say 33 times God's, it's like beautiful. That is like thing we say, a wonder of God's. Second, 33 we say thanks. And the third one we say Allahu Akbar. We might have heard it. That means God is great. And that we finish it with the 34, 33, 33, 33, but we say last one. So tasbih is, you get gifts, especially if you go to pilgrimage, that's what you will get those. Next. This is, most of the people know about Kaaba. That's where so this is where we go for Hajj. Muslims are commanded at least to go there once time in their life if they are physically able and financially able to do it. People used to go many times. I think the Muslim population is going up, and the last I heard was 1.9 billion. So, I mean, they're thinking so Saudi Arabia is now putting a lot of limits. So if I apply again, they're going to say, if you went to Hajj, you have to wait. If some people who haven't done it, they will take first. They will take precedence on it. So this is like, we believe, it is like that it was built by Prophet Abraham and his son, Prophet Ismail there. And we go, and this kind of Hajj is not also, didn't start with Islam. We say those Arabic prayers, but this has been there for centuries. People have been gathering in that place, we believe, since time of Prophet Abraham. Next. This is, it's a black stone. If you read about this, it's like a symbolism or object. Is part of one of the corner of Kaaba, and we believe that when Prophet Ibrahim was building that, this one was given to him. We believe it from heaven, okay? And it's called Aswad, which is an Arabic word, means black. There's some tradition, they say that when it came, it was white, coming from heaven over centuries, Usually there are like 3-4 million, 3 plus or sometimes 4 million. When I went, it was almost 4 million people. And people go and kiss or touch and everything. So they think over centuries, millennial, that has changed into that. Next. This is also a part of that Kaaba, that we have a very, it's a very sacred place for us. We believe those are the footsteps of Prophet Abraham when he was standing on it and building it. So this is like, you can look at it, you cannot touch it. They have protected it. Next. And this is Masjid al-Nabawi or Medina. This is where Prophet Muhammad is buried, but this is our second most sacred place, or mosque or place you must have heard. So we, Kaaba, that's like our first, this is second, and then the temple, that's where, unfortunately all this strife is going on, but that's the most third sacred is, because we believe Prophet Muhammad went from there, just like people say, it's just like a spiritual, and then went to heavens, and he had a spiritual everything. So that's the 3 sacred mosques for us. Next. So if you pay attention to that, I was just going to say, you might have heard, if you ever hear, like, on not Wendy, Kings Highway. You pass there. There's a mosque for Bosnian people, and there was a big controversy because they wanted to build minarets, and they said not. Minaret is a very sign of the mosque, and basically what it means, it started at people, the muezzin or any person can go on the top, and they used to call for prayer. So you might hear it. We have it 5 times during the day. Most of the places, most of the country has actually started to put some dampen, even Muslim. Just imagine, it's like churches, you have lots of mosques, one after the other, and now with time they have microphone and everything, So like everybody starts, so they're saying then if you want to do it, just do it without that. And so that you will see minarets in different shape and types for different places. Then I put it on the left-hand side, it's called Mimbar. Any mosque, if you go, you're more than welcome to come our mosque here. That's where imam or whoever is giving khutbah, they sit there. From our perspective, you don't have to have somebody who's have to give it. Anybody can stand and lead the prayer. Any Muslim can do that. Next. Thank you. So you can stop that, and I can just show it to you briefly. So a couple of things, these are like our verses from Quran. On that, we have the 99 names of Allah, which we just try to recite as much. It's basically all the virtues of God, that He is merciful, He is, He blesses us, He forgives us, all those kind of things are there. I just wanted to put it there. I should have put there. I have some copies of Quran or some flyers or anything. More than welcome if you're going to take those. The rest of things are not. So these are, as I say, I have 2 or 3 copies. I mean, we cannot have any shapes. So Muslim calligraphy and those. So basically, you could have flowers, different shapes. If you go all over the world, different Muslim countries, or look at the historical books, everything, the best calligraphy you will come across from there. So writing Quran in different ways is like one of the art people love to learn that. I have these these are crystal replicas of Kaaba, and this is a crystal replica of where Prophet Muhammad, which I say our second mosque is there. These are different, these are like, our most favorite prayers. We try to say it almost every day. This is the name of Allah, God. That's what it is, why I showed it to you. You will see in different ways. That is our Shahada. I put it there if you have time. I know we're running short of time. These are men will cover their head when they're saying prayer. They don't have to. Women have to cover their head. So these are I put a kind of scarf or what you call here about hijab. That's what we're talking about. And these are prayer rugs. So, I mean, you can go as much as, so the older I'm getting, I started buying more, which is padded one. Before it usually, but they do a lot of beautiful, the artwork, like prophets, the Masjid al-Nabawi, where Prophet Muhammad is buried, or Kaaba. They will do it, different shapes and those. We do not need to have that to say prayers. I have in my office at the hospital, but you just need a clean place, and you can pray. So you might have seen it when we get especially for interfaith, we just put white sheets and we could do it. Before we had we were looking, where is we always face Mecca. So that's what it is. I put a small one, it's a travel one. Now you don't need it. Everybody has an iPhone. You can compose, where, you can easily say which way it is. Each city, now it is, we have our own apps. Anytime I land, I just need to put the city's name. It's going to tell me which way is Mecca, what times are the prayer times in that place. I'll stop here, and then I will ask Mary if there's any question. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ghazala. It was fascinating to learn about some of the beautiful artistry that is important, even though they don't really have any objects that are important. My faith tradition is the same way. We don't have any sacred objects, but years ago, a reporter asked one of our modern day prophets, "So, what is the symbol of your faith?" And he said simply, it's the lives of the people. And I would like to include Valerie and Rabbi and Jack and Ghazala in that God is in you, and that has been reflected today in your presentation. So thank you. This has been a wonderful event. I have one last thank you, big thank you, and that is to our talented graphic designer, Jelaine Hall, who created that flyer for us. So if you want to take a look at that mandala that was created, there are many sacred symbols and in this, and so see how many you can find, sort of as a fun seek and find activity. Please join us at our next events. We have an Interfaith Festival that will be held on September 14th in Cottleville, Missouri. There's details out in the front lobby, also on our website and newsletters and our social media outlets. And we especially hope that you'll attend our annual dinner on October the 28th at St. Louis University High School. We have refreshments out in the foyer, thanks to Michelle Singer and Evelyn Beretta. Please feel free, though, to come up to our speakers and ask them questions. We're not just building an organization here and an interfaith movement, we're building people. And so we're building beautiful people. And so thank you for coming tonight to help build a peaceful world where we can all flourish as neighbors and friends. Thank you very much.